السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. معكم الدكتور عبدالله محمد خليل، رئيس قسم اللغة الإنجليزية بكلية الآداب جامعة دمار، أستاذ مساعد في الأدب الإنجليزي. So first, let me thank Al-Baydha University for inviting me to do a presentation in this distinguished conference. Then I'd like to welcome all researchers and scholars who are attending online with us today. My presentation today will basically deal with the concept of tragedy in literature. So I'm going to discuss how the concept of tragedy is redefined by the contemporary British critic Thierry Eggleton. So I'll show how tragedy used to be theorized by the classical critics and philosophers, then how modern critics today view tragedy, then in order to look at the interesting ideas by Thierry Eggleton in this regard. The title of my presentation is Thierry Eggleton's Theory of the Tragic, reflected on current Arab socio-political context. These are some introductory remarks. The concept of tragedy has changed greatly since early modern ages, more specifically in the 16th century. Modern people are supposed to view tragedy in a different way the classical people viewed it. Having grief towards an ordinary person and not a king, a queen, or a prince defines modern views of tragedy. Tragedy in modern time has no resonance in a society that believes in a just and a reasonable God. Now look at this chart, which show the different views of the word tragedy, the concept tragedy, by the classical people and modern people. In the classical ages, they used to project hyper people in their plays and dramas. Hyper people like kings, queens, princes. While in modern tragedies, they talked or highlighted the lives of ordinary people. So they talked about the lay person. They want to be more close to the lives of the majority of people. So in classical tragedies, it mostly spoke about single man, while in modern tragedies, dramas and plays spoke about a single man or a group of people, or sometimes a nation. They discuss, for example, the suffering of a nation because of war, and that is, the situations which are more close to real life. In classical tragedies, the tragedies are in fact caused by God and fate. Fate because, fate is controlled by God. While in modern tragedies, they believe that the cause is sometimes the society itself, politics, and economics. So these are the factors which caused the tragedies or tragic situations in our world today. So these are the main differences, in fact. And here, if you see, there's two examples given to the left side and to the right side. In the left side, there's a picture of King Oedipus. This is a great classic tragedy written by Sophocles in 429 before the Christ. It's King Oedipus or Oedipus the King. And the original name is Oedipus Rex. So it talks about the suffering of a king. And while in modern times, if you look at the picture, this is a picture of a salesman. This is a modern tragedy written by Arthur Miller, the famous American playwright. It was first enacted in 1949, in fact. And it talks about the suffering of a salesperson, a salesman, an ordinary man in life. So that is the difference, in fact, between the classical tragedies and modern tragedies. Terry Eagleton, a British literary theorist, critic, and a public intellectual who was born in 1943, redefines the notion of tragedy. Now, these are the questions to be addressed in this presentation or in my paper. Question number 1 is, why does Terry Eagleton come up with a new theory of the tragic? Question number 2, what is Eagleton's theory of the tragic? Question number 3, how is Eagleton's theory of the tragic relevant to our own world? In other words, in question 4, how does Eagleton's planetary theory of tragedy that confronts global politics connect to the contemporary situations in the Arab world? So these are the basic questions to be addressed in the paper. Now, why a new theory of tragedy? Why Terry Eagleton is supposed to come up with a new theory of the tragedy? In order to reconcile some highlighted views of tragedy, like tragedy is now dead in our post-tragic era, and that it is Judaism and Christianity that are responsible for its demise or decline. So this is a postmodern view of tragedy, in fact. The second thing is to object to the hierarchical views of tragedy, for example, sketching the lives of the high-born over the ordinary and the oppressed. And these are the main reasons which made Terry Eagleton come up with a new definition for the word or the concept tragedy. Now let's look at the definition of tragedy in literature. Tragedy is defined as a play dealing with tragic events and having an unhappy ending, especially one concerning the downfall of the main character. Now, this definition of tragedy as that which ends sadly is still unsatisfying for Eagleton. Eagleton, in his book Sweet Violence, projects different views, contemporary views of tragedy. For example, the traditionalists' views. Traditionalists like Steiner still believe in the sad ending as the basic parameters of the tragic, while radicals like Bakhtin believe in that it is no longer desirable. This is the word that Bakhtin uses. Tragedy is no longer desirable. And the conservatives, for example, along with Nietzsche, have concluded that tragedy is no longer possible since people no longer believe in fate and the gods. So these are the major views of tragedy by different critics with different trends in our contemporary time. Now come to Eagleton's theory of the tragic connected to the Arab world. So some beliefs of Eagleton connected or related to tragedy is that tragedy did not die in the 20th century but mutated into modernism. And this is the belief of Terry Eagleton, that it is mutated and not dead. Religion, and he meant by religion Christianity and Judaism, in modern time serves to the notion tragedy is dead, in the sense that it promotes tragedy as an ordeal by God. And that is, theologians and religious people used to support kings in this way. They used to tell people that whatever a king does, we should follow, because all his actions, or the king's and queen's actions, are ordained by God only. So it is a godly actions, in fact, that we have to blindly follow. Number 3, tragedy in modern time is no more accepted as ennobling or edifying the personality. For example, modern people are no more inspired by the idea that tragedy is good to go through in life just because it uplifts personality. Nobody will accept that in order to have uplifted personality, he must go through tragic events. So people can easily avoid tragedies in life. So this is the idea. The last point is, an important point, is terror and tragedy. And Terry Eagleton spoke about it in a lecture to him in 2008 in Cairo, when he came to the American University of Cairo to deliver the speech in the occasion of remembering Mahmoud Darwish. He said that terror and tragedy are connected, and that terrorism is a byproduct of the West, if not at all a Western creation. So he believes that terrorism in the world is a creation of the West, and the West cause terrorism, and when they fight terrorism, they use terrorism to fight it in the world. So they cause suffering to many nations in the world, and this is a reality that Terry Eagleton projects in his ideas. Okay, now let's have some contemporary Arab situation which is related to Eagleton's theory of the tragic. Many critics worldwide felt sorry about the killing of the Libyan ex-president Muammar Gaddafi, who has murdered thousands of Libyans during his lifetime just for opposing him. So most of the people and critics in the world felt sorry about his demise, but they didn't show any sorrow regarding the thousands of people which were killed during his lifetime. In The Country of Men, which is a novel, a contemporary novel, written by Hisham Matar, a Libyan novelist. In The Country of Men is an English tragic novel written by the Libyan writer named Hisham Matar. Matar projects in the novel a miserable life led by the most of the Libyans under the regime of Gaddafi. So as far as I know, this is the best example, the best novel which projects the tyrant, an Arab tyrant, and the miserable life people used to live under the reign of this tyrant. Now we'll go to the concluding remarks. Eagleton concludes that tragedy is mainly a result of the evil which is found inside every human being. The second thing is his purpose in redefining and re-evaluating tragedy is to highlight the danger of politics in today's world, that politics is the major cause behind most tragedies of our contemporary life. So these are the main concluding remarks by Eagleton. Thank you so much for listening, and I'd like again to thank Al-Baydha University for inviting me. I wish everybody all the best. Thank you so much.